disappears. Now, where it is, it's in his hand.
Rameses, let my people go!
The 10 Plagues of Egypt, Ethical Reflections and Modern Implications. The story of the 10 Plagues of ancient Egypt, recounted in the book of Exodus, is one of the most dramatic accounts in religious history. It narrates the liberation of the Israelites from ancient Egyptian African slavery through a series of catastrophic events, said to have been inflicted by God upon the Africans. However, this narrative has sparked significant ethical and theological debates, questioning the morality of the actions attributed to God and their implications for justice and divine authority. The account portrays ancient Egypt as both a refuge and an oppressor. According to the story, Africans initially provided sanctuary to the Israelites during a famine, but generations later, the Israelites were enslaved. Critics of the narrative have suggested that the story oversimplifies history and unjustly defames the ancient Egyptian Africans. This view highlights how religious teachings can sometimes obscure cultural identities and histories. For many, the story of the plagues has been interpreted as God's struggle to liberate his people, but others argue it reflects an attempt to undermine the cultural and spiritual legacy of Africans. This raises questions about the portrayal of ancient Egyptians in religious texts and the broader implications of framing their gods and culture as enemies to divine justice. A central critique of the 10 plagues lies in the concept of collective punishment. The plagues afflicted all ancient Egyptian Africans, including innocent civilians and children, for the decisions of one person. For instance, the death of the firstborn and the poisoning of water sources with dead bodies and blood disproportionately harmed those who had no role in this fabricated story of oppressing the Israelites. Such suffering challenges the notion of a just and merciful God. The escalating severity of the plagues, from infestations of locusts to the killing of the firstborn, raises questions about the proportionality of God's actions. Why should an entire nation, including farmers, laborers, and children, suffer for the decisions of their leader? Modern ethical principles, such as individual accountability, appear to conflict with the broad and indiscriminate nature of these punishments. The narrative suggests that God required Pharaoh's permission to release the Israelites, raising theological questions about God's all-powerfulness if he had to request permission from a king to achieve his goal of freeing the Israelites. If God is all-powerful, why was it necessary to resort to such measures? Additionally, the hardening of Pharaoh's heart by God, as described in the text, complicates the moral evaluation of these events. The historicity of the 10 plagues remains a topic of debate among scholars. Some suggest natural explanations, such as environmental disasters, diseases, or volcanic activity, to account for the plagues. Others view the story as allegorical, symbolizing themes of liberation and divine justice rather than recounting historical events. The lack of archaeological evidence to support this fabricated story in the Bible further casts doubt on its literal interpretation. However, the story's enduring cultural and spiritual significance has led many to reflect on its metaphorical meanings, such as the struggle for freedom and the consequences of injustice. The 10 Plagues of ancient Egypt is one of the many lies in the Holy Bible that invites profound ethical and theological reflection. It challenges believers and skeptics alike to consider the nature of justice, the use of power, and the portrayal of historical and cultural identities. For some, this lie is a story of God's liberation and justice. For others, it raises troubling questions about the morality of inflicting suffering upon the innocents. In a world still grappling with issues of oppression and power, the narrative remains a touchstone for exploiting power, justice, and mercy in both God and human actions. Revisiting the origins of biblical narratives, historical and religious perspectives. The idea that some biblical stories, including those in the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, may be fabricated has long sparked debate among scholars, theologians, and historians. These discussions often lead to deeper questions about the authenticity of the God of the three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and the intentions of those who wrote these stories. Who were the people behind these narratives? And what historical circumstances contributed to their creation? The role of the Catholic Church and the Reformation. The answers to these questions often intertwine with the history of the Roman Catholic Church, particularly from the 11th century onward. The Catholic Church was the central institution of Christian Europe, unifying believers under its teachings and maintaining control over biblical interpretation. However, by the 15th and 16th centuries, significant divisions emerged within Christendom. Rich individuals, and Christian communities historically associated with Catholicism began to challenge the Church's authority. This period was known as the Age of Reformation or Protestant Reformation, marked a turning point in European religious history. The Protestant Reformation and the Hebrew Bible. Among the groups that dissociated from Catholicism were Christians in Germany, who played a pivotal role in this transformative period. Armed with their Catholic educational background, these reformers sought to make biblical teachings accessible to ordinary people. Using the technology of the printing press, they compiled, printed, and distributed what they called the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament, derived largely from Catholic teachings. This effort was revolutionary in that it emphasized personal faith and direct access to Scripture, breaking away from the centralized control of the Catholic Church. However, it also introduced significant reinterpretations and fabrications that served to reshape the identity of these reformers. One of the more controversial claims is that these German Christians used the Old Testament to forge a new identity for themselves as Hebrews or Israelites. This reinterpretation was presented to the Pope, but instead of acceptance, it provoked the anger of the Catholic Church. The Church quickly recognized that the stories in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, or the 5 books of Moses, while rooted in older traditions, had been altered to create a distinct narrative framework that aligned with the Reformers' theological and social agendas. These alterations, some argue, served not only religious but also political purposes. By identifying themselves as Hebrews, these groups could claim a spiritual lineage that connected them directly to the biblical patriarchs, bypassing the authority of the Catholic hierarchy. The creation of the Hebrew Bible during the Reformation raises critical questions about the intersection of faith, history, and identity. The Hebrew Bible and Old Testament remain foundational texts for millions of believers worldwide. Yet, their history is a reminder of how religious texts can evolve and be reshaped over time. Understanding the historical forces behind these narratives invites us to approach them with both reverence and critical inquiry, seeking to uncover the truths they reveal about the human quest for meaning, identity, and connection to the God. The Jews, Hebrews, or Israelites were European Christian separatists, like the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses group, whose actions significantly reshaped the history and direction of the Abrahamic religions as we know them today. In the future, we will delve deeper into these themes through historical analysis, uncovering valuable insights into how religious traditions have adapted and transformed over the centuries.